And so the microbiome is the soil of which us as plants live in. And if you look at most of our soil samples, you would see a lot of chemicals and unpleasant things that shouldn't be there that are degrading these 300 trillion natural bacteria that live on your skin. And then from cheek to cheek, they're living within your digestive system. And so it's really kind of a simple concept is that all the nutrients and the diversity of your soil is your microbiome. And if you compare how much human DNA versus bacterial DNA you actually have 99% of the DNA that's on or in your body is actually bacterial DNA. And so this symbiotic relationship is incredibly important. Some people call it the brain-gut axis. But without the diversity of that microbiome, it's almost impossible for someone to completely express health.
Welcome to Nutrition Without Compromise, a podcast brought to you by Orlo Nutrition. We believe that nutrition shouldn't be an either or, that you should never have to sacrifice your morals for your health or that of our home planet. Join natural products veteran Karina Belizzi and experts from around the globe as they discuss healthy solutions that are better for you and better for the planet.
Welcome to another interview episode of Nutrition Without Compromise. Have you ever asked yourself the simple question, is a calorie just a calorie? Or does it really matter where that energy source comes from? To dive into this topic, specifically as it relates to health of your gut and achieving and maintaining your ideal weight, I'm joined today by Dr. William Ferro. Dr. Bill is the founder and CEO of Betr Health, that's BETR Health, focusing on gut health and personalized nutrition. Originally a chiropractor, he developed a unique wellness approach aiming to overcome the constraints of conventional healthcare. His work, celebrated in over 1,700 reviews and integrated into major insurance plans, exemplifies his impact. With a background in biology, endocrinology, and chiropractic, Dr. Ferro combines extensive healthcare and IT experience, managing wellness centers and developing management systems for health facilities to ultimately impact your health for the better. As we hear from Dr. Bill, remember that this podcast is intended for education and perhaps a little bit of entertainment purposes only. Our discussions should not be construed as medical advice. A doctor or provider-patient relationship is not implied or real. If you have specific health conditions or concerns that you need help with, you really should work with your individual healthcare provider. With that out of the way, let's welcome Dr. Bill.
Hey there.
How are you doing today?
Good. I see that you mentioned Dr. Lee. I didn't realize this, but you had him on your podcast.
Yeah, Eat to Beat Disease. I've interviewed Dr. Lee a couple of times for this show, and I also appeared on his YouTube channel when we did a deep dive into omega-3s for his audience. I think that particular video is at over 40,000 views now. So his audience has been better educated on all things omega-3 through my expertise as well. It's been a lot of fun.
It's great. This is one of my favorite books. So when I just saw it on your intro there, I said, hey, wait a minute. I have that book.
Yeah. Eat to Beat Disease, Eat to Beat Your Diet. He does talk a fair amount about gut health as well, and just getting a variety of nutrition sources so that we can achieve our best health. So I'm venture to guess that some of what we talk about today will reflect back on that.
Absolutely, for sure. And thanks for having me. I really appreciate any audience that's willing to listen. I'm willing to talk.
Well, I'd like to start the story today with learning a bit about you and your origin story. What led you to become a chiropractor and now a healthcare provider in a new way that specializes in both gut health and endocrinology?
Absolutely. So I was inspired to be a chiropractor because I was a basketball player and hurt my back and went to a chiropractor. I was 16 years old. They told me I wasn't going to play basketball anymore. I got the worst of the worst diagnosis as a 16-year-old. Reluctantly went to a chiropractor. I was like, it's going to be pretty quacky. I'm a New York kid, so I was really cynical and skeptical. And lo and behold, probably within 10 days, I was feeling better pretty quickly, but within 10 days, I was able to start moving again. And within 30 days, I was literally playing basketball again. And the guy just worked with me, and I said, hey, you know what? This is something interesting I'd want to do with my life. So went to UMass Amherst, got my undergrad in biology, and then went on to 4 years of chiropractic school in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's where I kind of got burst into the world of health, fitness, and wellness.
Yeah, I've discussed this before with other chiropractors on this show. One of the things that I think the general public doesn't understand about the chiropractic thought and really kind of the school of medicine there is so focused on holistic health, and that you are in a sense like the guardians of health information as it related to diet and nutrition and how that helped your body heal more so than medical doctors. And so there's a reason that we've seen a rise of people from this chiropractic wellness perspective into, comprehensive health and nutrition, more integrative approaches to health and wellness. Now, you mentioned a specific injury. I've had injuries that were only helped through chiropractic. I got in a side impact car crash where my car literally went over a cliff and landed
Wow.
in some brush. And so my neck would freeze up on one side. And the only way for me to get through those days without a lot of pain would be to go see Dr. Jack Knox. And he had a specific method of unfreezing my muscles by using an actuator, but he actually used his thumb and just kind of would actuate the muscle and give me relief to the point where I could turn my head side to side, which you take for granted until you have an injury like that. So I wonder if you have a particular story or something that stands out from someone that you have helped through your chiropractic and also through now your comprehensive wellness programs to really get back to their more centered health.
Yeah, absolutely. So both of us in this case experienced injury. And with physical therapy, chiropractic, massage, acupuncture, that's where we shine, right? You take an acute injury and you're able to make the person feel really good. And for me, I wanted to take people from pain to performance. So I actually opened up a chiropractic office in a gym. As it turned out, it was a really great way to practice, a fun way to practice. And as an entrepreneur, I grew that one location to 30 locations. And so we were really good with the acute issues. But then comes in chronic pain. And that's where I found out that we were really not any better in often cases than your traditional medication approach, because the pain just kept coming back. And it wasn't always due to some acute trauma like we have experienced, like I had a back injury or you had a car accident. What I really started to realize is that there was something else happening here. And I was diving into diet and nutrition, realized inflammation was the key fundamental factor behind most of these chronic conditions. And that if I wasn't going to address that, I really wasn't going to do what chiropractic was supposed to do, is really make the person healthy from the inside out. And so that's when I shifted a lot of my focus towards diet and nutrition, probably one of the most confusing subjects of all time for most. And then that led me down the road to say, is it really about nutrition, or is it more about how you absorb? So we always use that expression, you are what you eat, but you are what you eat. You mobilize, can absorb and utilize and eliminate. And that's what got me down the road of gut health.
As we kick off this discussion specifically around gut health, people may have heard you are what you eat versus you are what you absorb. If you don't absorb it, you're essentially paying for expensive excrement in some ways. Like people end up spending a lot on nutrition, on dietary supplements, some of which are never really integrated into our systems, but which bear some pretty outrageous, in some cases, dietary claims of the things that they can help you tackle, whether it be through testimonials offered on websites or use cases or just, essentially offering something in a pill that is harder to absorb than if you get it from, let's say, a food. So I wondered if you could talk a bit about how our microbiome supports this whole process and why it's so important to look at a specific nutrient source. Like when we say a calorie is not just a calorie, what that means with regard to our gut health, and ultimately help answer this question about why we should care about the bugs in our gut, the bugs in our body.
Absolutely. Well, as it relates to the human experience now is, 60% of us have a chronic condition, 40% of us have two or more. Our kids are anxious and depressed. Our skin is a mess. We have on all these types of different medications. And unfortunately, the end user or the patient is usually the scapegoat. Well, you're lazy, you're unmotivated, you're uneducated, or there's something wrong with your genetics. Well, if you don't have to look any further than the founder of farther modern medicine, which is Hippocrates, who said, you really need to look well to the gut for the root of all disease. And here's why. If I have a plant and the plant suddenly stops growing properly, I don't start blaming the plant and say, well, there's something wrong with this plant. I, of course, say, well, maybe I'm not giving it enough water. Maybe I'm not giving it sun. Maybe I'm giving too much sun. And ultimately, if I'm a really good gardener, I will look at the soil. And so the microbiome is the soil of which us as plants live in. And if you look at most of our soil samples, you would see a lot of chemicals and unpleasant things that shouldn't be there that are degrading these 300 trillion natural bacteria that live on your skin. And then from cheek to cheek, they're living within your digestive system. And so it's really kind of a simple concept is that all the nutrients and the diversity of your soil is your microbiome. And if you compare how much human DNA versus bacterial DNA you actually have 99% of the DNA that's on or in your body is actually bacterial DNA. And so this symbiotic relationship is incredibly important. Some people call it the brain gut axis, but without the diversity of that microbiome, it's almost impossible for someone to completely express health. And then, as you mentioned, there's different nutrient sources that feed different types of bacteria. And all those bacteria feed off of fiber. So one of the biggest key, components to getting back to good health is making sure you have a fiber-rich diet.
So, for those watching on YouTube or who are gathering this in a more visual format, you'll see in my background, there's an arugula salad with some shaved radish and some tomatoes in the background, all of which have micronutrients contained within that help to support your health, but which also have a fair amount of fiber. And fiber is essentially that building block that the microbiome eats, thrives, and survives on. And so, if we aren't getting a fiber rich diet, then we aren't feeding the microbiome the same way. And so, much like when an infant is born and they are going through the vaginal path, they are getting their early microbiome, not only from their mother there, but also through breastfeeding. And if they don't have those two things going for them, we see demonstrably that it takes them a while to catch up and be able to digest food without issue. And so essentially, what we're getting at here is that it's not our systems that really digest the food we eat. It's the microbiome that's present in our guts that digests the food and enables the nutrients to get into our systems. So I'm curious, just given that whole construct, how you serve the people that you engage with to help them get these things right, to help them look to nutrition first, and then perhaps a few core supplements that you know are evidence-backed and that can really support their journey.
Absolutely. So the first thing I want everyone to know is if you've been struggling with your weight, your sleep, your mood, your energy, you're just kind of at your wit's end, you've tried every diet program out there, you've tried everything, it's not your fault. The first thing you do is have to let yourself off the hook because that is a beautiful arugula salad until it was sprayed with glyphosate. So, unfortunately, unless it's organic, you're really rolling the dice that glyphosate is coming in and doing more damage to your microbiome than good. So it is important to have a really good supplement source where you know that it is controlled. Obviously, we want it to be sustainable, but you don't want to get any bad stuff in when you're trying to do good. But I think the number one mistake people do is they write off their health to something out external. Again, genetics, bad luck, age, but it's none of those things. We have people getting jaw-dropping transformations inside and out just by focusing on their microbiome. And so we'll take somebody in and say, if you could just give us 3 good days, 3 days of no alcohol, artificial sweeteners, look about the lotions you're putting in your skin. I mean, if most of the people, if I'm on a call with, I say, hey, where's the hand lotion by you? And they'll say, oh, it's right here. And I say, well, if the first ingredient is aqua or water, well, then you know it's going to have an antimicrobial with it, which means as soon as you put it on, you're killing off your microbiome. So the way we do it is start with 3 good days, fuel the body, and guess what happens with 3 good days of putting the body at ease, not counting calories, and then getting those extra nutrient sources that you need. Your body starts to convert fat to energy while you're asleep. Your energy goes up, your mood goes up, and every day you're on this, it gets easier and easier because then your brain and your gut start talking to each other and say, hey, I'm full, or my neurotransmitters are working, my serotonin's being created, so I'm not as anxious anymore. And so versus dieting and eliminating certain things, that's actually just going to make it worse over time. So the source of your ingredients, I think, is one of the most important pieces because wow, how terrible would it be if you ate quote unquote healthy for 3 or 4 weeks and still didn't see a change, only to find out that the food that was healthy was either man-made, tons of chemicals, and not the right source. And the same goes for supplementation. Some of these things are, quality and safety is in doubt. And if you don't have a trusted source, you might be doing more harm than good.
Well, I think we should pause for a moment here and talk about a couple of things that you brought up through that really great answer, by the way. You talked about glyphosate and the problems of indoctrination of glyphosate into foods and how you might want to avoid that by going to organic produce if you can afford to do so. And most people can, as long as you are, being mindful about your product selection overall. In fact, sometimes you'll see them on sale for a lower price than the conventionally farmed versus. So, I mean, it's not always a matter of cost. But glyphosate is commonly used in all of our wheat products, and people tend to consume quite a bit of grain. So things like oat products, wheat products that are essentially sprayed with glyphosate. Now, if our audience wants to go on a deep dive into that, we actually had the glyphosate girl herself, Kelly Ryerson, on this podcast. So I'll link to that show and enable people to revisit that topic deeply. She's deeply involved with the people who are behind the film Common Ground, that also talks about our soil health and how we can get to a healthier soil base. She was even featured in that film alongside some other really notable people. So I think it's important to continue that conversation, to go a little deeper if you're interested, and to better understand why you might want to choose products that are organic as opposed to conventional. Now, when it comes to something like a supplement, a lot of what's offered out there as food supplements, as nutritional supplements, are in a synthetic form that might be somewhat cheap, that might also not be in its more bioavailable form. This is particularly important when we talk about things like B vitamins, like methylcobalamin, vitamin B12 is a for example. Some people have what they colloquially refer to as the mother gene, the MTHFR gene. And so we have to be careful in many cases about making sure we're getting sources that our bodies can integrate. So what do you tend to counsel people to do? Do they need to go out there and get a test to see if they have this issue? Or do you just generally come to them and say, look, here's the smart choices to make. These are the sorts of supplements, especially as a vegan or vegetarian, that you could consider, just generally speaking?
Yeah. So generally speaking, I say, let's start with food. Let's see how your body reacts to removing as many chemicals and poisons as possible. As Jack LaLanne once said to me, if man made it, don't eat it. So if it's something in a package and whatever, first start with just the food. Then see after that what your body is now not absorbing, not utilizing. So I think testing can be a really, really important part here, because if you can clean up what you're eating and start feeling better, then taking a test, then you're really going to know what level I'm really at. And so I'm really a big fan of testing. I'm not a big fan of testing prior to changing the lifestyle, because then I know that if you're not embracing the microbiome and the organic movement, well, then you're throwing seeds in a desert. And that amount of money that you're putting into the next latest greatest pill really should be used for the healthy food that's glycophosphate free. And I'm such a fan of the glycophosphate girl, so I'm so happy you had her on. But that's really it. So you start with what is the lowest common denominator to get you the best results. And then once you get to that point, then I think testing is a phenomenal way to go. And when I counsel people is I don't try to give them any guidance in terms of, hey, you have to have this. You'll know, because if you're doing elimination reintroduction and you're feeling good and you add something in, you should feel it. Not always, but really you should. If it's a high quality supplement and it's actually providing value and your body's at a place that the brain and the gut are talking to each other, yeah, you will see the difference there. So important to clean that stuff out first, get a good baseline, and then when you add it in, you'll really know if it's doing what it was designed to do.
Now, you mentioned going through an elimination diet. Do you recommend those for generally healthy people, or is it something that you focus on an individual who's really confronting a specific health issue?
To me, it's the gold standard. None of us know, right? Broccoli for one person is great, and for somebody else, it's not. I'm not a huge fan of testing for that purpose, because in my experience, I would use those tests. And by the way, everything I'm telling you here is because I tried it with thousands of patients. So I'm even ashamed to say that way back when I was first new to this, I was doing the calorie counting with people. And I'm ashamed that I was that way. I didn't know any better. That's what we were taught, even in chiropractic school. So all of this time, when I started doing saliva testing, poop testing, urine testing, I was doing the food allergy testing. It was making things more confusing for people. And then the funny part is when DNA testing came out, and they're still doing this today, and they tell you, well, this is precision nutrition based on your DNA. I've had people retake the test in a couple of months, and it gives them a completely different answer. So I would say that for most people, just doing a basic elimination reintroduction, And the way we do it is we make them take pictures of their lunch, their dinner, we're putting in their sleep, their poop, their mood, every piece of data point. Our AI actually can take the picture and turn it into the ingredients. So we want them to experience what works best for them. And I can tell you stories of a woman that was referred to us by one of the gym chains we work with, EOS Fitness, and she was struggling 3 times a week with a trainer for a full year, eating quote unquote healthy. If you saw what she was eating, you would say, wow, that's actually a very, very healthy diet. And she wasn't losing a pound. We did elimination reintroduction with her, and she ended up losing 42 pounds in 60 days. And guess what? The foods that were what we'll call a trigger food or a food that wasn't working well for her was quinoa, Greek yogurt, and raspberries. I mean, that's on every cover of every nutrition magazine that those things are good for you, but it wasn't serving her body well. So I think everybody can, do well with an elimination reintroduction.
Well, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm sensitive to broccoli and quinoa. And so, as somebody who also is trending towards veganism, I'm fully vegetarian at this point, but I still use some whey protein, and I won't turn a salad away if I'm served it and has cheese on it. So I'm not militant, right? I'll have a cookie with my kids, and I'm not going to ask the person who made it at the bake sale if it had eggs in it. Whatever. Right. Okay. So I'm not being crazy about it. And I'm not criticizing people who are more militant about it. I'm just saying, for me, this is what works for now. Right. Sure. And I will tell you that what I've noticed is that when I eliminated animal products, or basically meats and most dairy from my diet, my skin cleared up. My hormones, as it relates to my period, are really flattened out. Like, I don't feel the deep swings in my emotions the same way. My skin cleared up. I'm not getting the same acne or breakouts. And I find that I don't have intense cravings around that time of the month either. I also went from having a somewhat variable period system. So I was, let's say on a 25-day cycle one month and then a 28 the next, and it's completely normalized. So I'm doing great. And at 48, almost 48 years old, to still be kind of on that same program where I'm not really experiencing any perimenopause symptoms. I mean, I'm feeling really good about it, right?
Absolutely.
But I also took an Everlywell test to see how I was insofar as food sensitivities. And it was very interesting to see them come back with food sensitivities that I'm like, I don't ever feel weird when I eat egg, as a for example, but it was saying I have a mild allergy to albumin, which is the egg protein. I don't ever feel weird when I eat, chicken or beef, but it was showing those up as potentially allergenic to me too. I don't know how much truth there was to that, right? For the food sensitivity side of things. It also didn't show anything with broccoli or quinoa, but that's because I haven't consumed them in a very long time. So even if you do go through the rigors of having a food sensitivity test done by Everlywell or by anybody else, that food sensitivity test will only compare to what you've actually consumed. So if you haven't consumed something for 6 months, it's not going to show up. And I wonder if that's what you're also speaking to when you say, genetically, somebody takes a test and they find the results are different 2 months later.
Yeah, I just think, to me, it's there's too many variables in those tests, and I bet there's a scientist way smarter than me on this that could probably prove different. I'm just trying to do what's going to get the member, my folks that trust me, to the quickest results that are sustainable at the lowest cost. So if it's a couple of $100 towards testing and whatever else that they're going to throw at it, I'd rather them just eat healthy for 21 days. And that I find always works. So that's my goal. My goal is to do no harm and to get them to stop blaming themselves and just give them a different pathway so they can figure out, hey, you know what, this works best for me. And no one knows based upon, let's just say, we've had people that will eat chicken from one grocery store, and get chicken from another and have a completely different reaction. Same thing with shrimp and other things. So I don't want to go through the guessing game of, well, maybe this test is wrong. Maybe the day I took it, I was already a little bit inflamed, and maybe that had something to do with it. If you just go through elimination reintroduction, you will be able to figure these things out on your own very, very quickly. And it doesn't mean it won't change. We've had people come to us that weren't eating a lot of meat and decided to add some in and felt better, and vice versa. People took some away. Same thing with people that thought they were really gluten sensitive. And after 30 days of the elimination reintroduction part, they realized they could actually have gluten, but what the gluten they did have was fresh baked. It was sourdough. They found some things that, maybe it was the way it was manufactured that was the issue, or the glycophosphate that was, caked on it. So elimination reintroduction is our gold standard over here.
Well, and I think if people learn to listen to their bodies, that they'll feel generally better. And in my experience, when you eat cleaner, which means real whole foods, that you're not as likely to feel a disconnection from the gut. You mentioned earlier, when we were just getting started, things like aspartame or other sweeteners that are introduced into beverages and foods, which can really disrupt our microbiome. Can we talk for a moment about the things that really are bad for our gut so that people kind of know what to watch out for, in addition, of course, to glyphosate, meaning non-organic grains and non-organic fruits and vegetables?
Yeah, so we talk about the number one thing I think is one of the biggest biodisruptors out there is the stuff you're putting on your skin. Hands down, it literally is getting right into your skin. And you know, when they say the first ingredient is aqua, that's a fancy name for saying it's water. And water doesn't moisturize you. You know, water doesn't go into the skin. That's why every time if we got into the shower, we'd come out like big bloated ticks if our body was really absorbing all that water. And so it just gives you the temporary feeling that it's moisturized, but really they're putting all these other chemicals in. So that's the one that I think you need to really, really pay attention to. Second is the aspartames, is the diet sodas. You're fooling your body. You know, when your body digestion begins from here, from sight and smell. And so if you're taking, let's say, a Jolly Rancher and it's got, you know, it's supposed to be strawberry, your body's getting ready. The enzymes, the digestive is getting ready to take in that strawberry. But really, it's not strawberry. It's this liquid chemical. And then your body feels like, oh, I can relax. This is something I can digest. And I think it's fooling the body over and over again. So any chemical, if you xanthan gum, all of these things, these additives that we're putting in, any of those things are now being studied as actually microbiome disruptors. So where I was once the quack 20 years ago talking about these microorganisms, luckily science has caught up, and now we can see this stuff in the research and point to, you know, poor microbiome health or gut health, however you want to put it, to just about every chronic condition that Americans are suffering today.
When we spoke earlier about Dr. William Li, I want to touch back on some things that he has shared in the process of interviewing him. One of which is really to just reduce our reliance on anything that is generally sweetened so that we get to a point where eating a piece of fruit actually tastes like dessert, that the natural sugars within that piece of fruit are a treat. And I think what we've become accustomed to is that sweeteners are inborn into many of the foods that we consume and the beverages. And so we get desensitized to them. But there's also some evidence that even these sweeteners, which are more naturally based, like the stevia sides, the glycosides from stevia, or from other things like monk fruit, like because it tastes sweet on the palate, it's sending a signal to our gut and to our brain to get ready for something that contains sugars, and that can actually spike our glycemic index as well. So that there's something to just something being sweet. And so one of the things that I think is important for us to do is to really focus on limiting the excess sugars that are in our diets and even the fake sugars. Because even if it comes from, you know, a tree like xylitol or from stevia, a plant, that we're desensitizing ourselves to what sweet is supposed to mean to our bodies and our minds.
100%. Almost every single member that goes through this protocol with us, they'll say in the first week or two, like 10 days, suddenly they're like, wow, the strawberries I'm eating taste so sweet. Like I start craving strawberries and I can walk past the sugar bowl at work and not want to dive into it. The brain and the gut, once they communicate, they start doing, this is ancient wisdom that your body's been designed to do. When I have people on a Zoom call, I look at them and I always kind of test this waters and I say, all right, of all of you out there, you're struggling with your weight. Yes. I'm struggling with my mood. Yes. Struggling with high blood pressure. You name it. I'm struggling with IBS, Crohn's, acid reflux, you name it. And I said, so how many of you have actually created your own human? Yeah, we have kids. I'm like, okay, so you were able to build a whole human in 9 months, but regulating your weight, your sleep, and your mood is just an absolute mystery to your body. If you cut the inside of your mouth, you don't have to Google how to fix it. It just goes to work. So we just have to get out of the way of the wisdom of the body and not overthink it. And I think what you're speaking to here is once the brain and the gut start working together, it will start telling you that I prefer the strawberry over the Jolly Rancher. Same thing with the coffee sweeteners that people are putting in. I had one woman say, I missed my whatever creamy choice. I don't know what she was drinking in the morning, but she said for her birthday, her daughter took her out. She'd been 4 weeks without it. Said, oh, what the heck? It's my birthday. Put it in. She said she almost gagged at the taste. Just like you and I might gag at stevia where other people think it's good. And and the artificial stuff. But once your body's back in balance, it will start to do what it was designed to do, which is tell you what it likes and tell you what it doesn't like.
100%. Now, you also mentioned earlier this inborn issue of inflammation. Now, this has also been referred to as the silent killer or as leading to what is called type 3 diabetes, which is also known as onset of dementia or Alzheimer's and some of these other disorders, which tend to come, you know, later in life, but which people even see earlier onset of. Now, if we get our inflammatory markers down, that tends to also be coupled with some lifestyle changes that promote health and promote the body's natural ability to heal and to return to what is called homeostasis. I, of course, have a deep background in omega 3s, and Orlo Nutrition, who sponsors and brings you this podcast, is producing omega 3s that are in the polar lipid form that are better absorbed so that they can get into your tissues quite easily. Now, what we've already seen in vegans, vegetarians, meat eaters, omnivores across the board is that people who take this supplement, the active omega 3s, over the course of 4 months, can see their markers rise from a 3.5% omega 3 index. That means 3.5% of their cells contain omega 3, or of the cell, 3.5% of it is comprised of EPA and DHA. We see them double, get up to 7%, closer to 8%, which is really where we want to be. 8% to 12% is what Omega Quant, who leads the omega 3 index and a lot of research, says is ultimately the level where we've optimized our ability to return to homeostasis or balance. They also have marked that level as a point at which there's a 75% drop in all-cause mortality, as exhibited in the Framingham study, which is multi-generational and going on in the Northeast region of the United States. So I think we have a lot of science already that shows us the building blocks and the things that we need to do to get inflammation under control so that our bodies can heal. But it seems that as much as we talk about this, like, people still aren't getting it.
Yeah, well, they always have to feel it. So to me, with Orlo, you're talking about, it's a great mediator. So we're all coming into this world inflamed chemically, and then we know we're inflamed, from our societal pressures, from the constant bickering from both sides of our, stupid political battles, to you name the fight, we're going to argue about it.
We're going to be stressed out. We're overworked. We're not sleeping enough. I mean, all of these impact inflammation, right? Yeah. And then in addition, we're getting a barrage of chemicals and pollutants in our environment, and the water we drink and the air we breathe. I mean, it's a lot. And I think that's probably why people aren't getting it, right? Because it feels overwhelming. So what I'd love to do with you today is to simplify it. Like, really, what are the core steps that people can take to really grab control of their own health so that they can bring their inflammatory markers down, get more connected to their body, and ultimately feel like they can make positive change, and of course work with their medical provider, but be a little bit more in control of their health.
For sure. And, from their mentality has to be with, this isn't my fault. The tobacco industry bought the food industry to make all of this stuff genetically engineered to where I'm going to crave it. I have all these other outsources that are working against me. So first is I don't want you to do anything more. I don't need you to Braveheart your thing into this. You don't need Tony Robbins to be in your closet every day. You don't need Oprah. I mean, they're all great people, but what I mean is that it's within your grasp within 3 days. Because what's great about bacteria is it grows fast and it grows fiercely, and your body wants to get back to homeostasis as fast as possible. So you don't have to be on this long, I hate the word health journey. Not that I shouldn't say hate, that's a strong word, but I don't care for it, because that immediately puts into, this is going to be a long road. It's not. It's a very quick road. 24 to 48 hours of you just reducing inflammation in your body. And that's why I love a mediator like the Orlo, is because a mediator can help them reduce that inflammation. You reduce inflammation, you're reducing insulin resistance, which means you're going to start to convert fat to energy. And who doesn't want to see the scales start going down and their mood start changing very quickly? Add that to all the fibrous food you're eating and drinking the water. You can get back control of your, or I should say, you can give back control to your brain and your gut axis within 24 to 72 hours. So really, I tell people it's 3 good days, just 3 good days. If you start doing the other thing, which is counting calories, flipping tires in parking lots, drink chalk shakes, thinking that your health comes from outside, there's something wrong with this, there's something wrong with that, overdo it, you're just going to stress yourself out versus, hey, 3 good days, grab some supplementation, eat the fibrous food, drink the water, get rid of the chemicals on your skin, and watch how fast that brain and gut start to recover, as well as the gut lining starts to recover within just 12 to 14 days. And some people say it's completely turned over by 21 days, which is why we then do the reintroduction. So let yourself off the hook, give yourself a break, focus on 3 good days, and put that plan in place and track it. Track your weight, your sleep, your mood, your energy, take pictures of your food, do that over a 3-day, 4-day period, and watch how much better you feel very quickly. And then you'll rediscover your ancient wisdom. That is the most important. It's the most empowering part of this whole thing. People lose a lot of weight on our program. They lose weight faster than Ozempic, Wegovy by 4 times. They lose 7% of their body weight in 30 weeks, but it's not about the weight loss. What it's showing you is that you've reduced the inflammation, the insulin resistance, so that your body can convert fat to energy while you're sleeping.
While they're sleeping, their bodies can heal. So that's essentially what we're getting back to. And I think that there's 2 things you brought up there that I want to touch back on as well. Water, hydration, right? Now, I know that we drink a lot of liquid, like I'm sitting here with my coffee today, which I tend to drink just about all day long. I love coffee. Get my chlorogenic acid in, right? The nod to Dr. William Lee right there.
Sure.
But I also know that if we consume more water, that we're giving our bodies the ability to flush out toxins, which often when we're on a weight loss journey is very needed. So we need to make sure that we're getting enough. But I also want to touch here on some work by Dr. David Perlmutter, who's really, he's a neurologist, neurosurgeon. He's spent a lot of time studying brain health. He's written a book called The Grain Drain, which is, about the brain and how
Sitting
consumption
on my shelf right there.
Yeah, so too much consumption of grains, and probably largely because of glyphosate infiltration, really does create an inflamed brain. And with an inflamed brain, that we have less of an ability to heal, to return to homeostasis. And also we're more likely to develop diseases later in life that relate to that consumption, right? But he's also recently written a book called Drop Acid, in which he's talking about consumption of water, that essentially when we don't consume enough, our bodies start to act like camels. And how do camels store water? They store it in their fat cells. And so if we're not getting enough water, that our body actually starts to store water within our cells themselves, and then therefore be less likely to get rid of the excess fat that you're carrying around with you. This can also negatively impact, of course, your kidney health, but cells at every level in your body. And so I think if we get our inflammation markers down while also ensuring that we have adequate hydration every day, that we're going to be setting ourselves up for greater success. How much water do you recommend people focus on drinking every day? Is it based on their body weight, or do you just have a standard marker?
Yeah, now, of course, this varies widely depending on the person. If someone could be in their 70s and they're going to be drinking a little bit less, might have some kidney issues. So this is not medical advice, as you mentioned earlier. But as a rule of thumb, 40 to 70 ounces of water is important. And your body will respond and tell you when too much is too much. So if you're getting up at night 3 or 4 times to go to the restroom, chances are you're drinking too much. But what ends up happening is, because when I put some of the program, they're eating more fiber than they've eaten before. They actually have to drink more water. Otherwise, they're going to get constipation, because fiber obviously absorbs the water. And so that's why a lot of people, when they go on this initially, water, a minimum of 40, probably up to 70 is good. But even more important than the water is, some people take a little Himalayan sea salt or Celtic sea salt and put it in the tongue, because you just want to stay electrolyte balanced as well, right? It's not just how much water you get, it's how much electrolytes that you're getting from your food, because too much water can be incredibly, dangerous. So water is one of the most important parts. And we talk about converting fat to energy. While you're sleeping, a lot of people we've been fooled to think that we're only losing weight, we're on a treadmill at a 45-degree angle and somebody's yelling at you. Actually, when you're at the state of ease and you have low inflammation in your body, you're actually burning it at night. That's what fasting is. So you're converting it to CO2 and breathing it out, and you're urinating it out. So people say to me all the time, "What do you think about intermittent fasting?" I'm like, you're already doing it. You do it every single day. That's why they call it breakfast. You're breaking the fast. So you can do more intermittent fasting if that's what you like to do. And I'm sure there's some benefit to doing that intermittently. but it doesn't mean you have to live your life. In my opinion, you don't have to live your life by that, because I want to make sure you're getting enough water, fiber to feed the microbiome.
Yeah. And I'll just nod to Dr. Michael Greger's work. We're actually going to be bringing him on this podcast this summer as well. He has written some incredible books, and I just love what he's doing in the world of health and nutrition. But one of the things that he brings out in his research is that when we consume food in line with our circadian rhythm, that the same meal eaten earlier in the day, we actually burn more of those calories than if we were to eat that same meal later in the day, regardless of how much energy we expended throughout the day. So, if you're going to consume food with the thought of losing weight and also attaining all of your standard markers of nutrition, then having a solid meal in the first half of the day versus the last half can actually be supportive of a weight loss journey as well. And so I encourage people to check out his website is nutritionfacts.org, and he supplies a plethora of information for people as well. And I personally, I've done the intermittent fasting thing where I don't eat before noon or 2. I haven't found that it helps me to lose more weight. I actually find that I am able to achieve my macros more consistently if I consume, like, let's say, a protein shake in the morning, and then I have a broader meal with like a salad and maybe fruit, nuts, and everything else a little bit later in the day, and then more of a protein, like a lean protein at night. And that I tend to be able to hit all of my major needs for fiber as well as protein. And that even as I've transitioned to a vegan and vegetarian diet, I'm maintaining my muscle mass. So I'm in fact building muscle. I've proven since the beginning of the year that even eating this way, that I'm putting on a pound of muscle in the first 3-4 months of the year, which is hard to do at 47 years old, and also on a vegan vegetarian diet.
I would agree. I think you just brought up the point that I try to make, because things are so confusing and there's so much information thrown at people. Well, do this, do that. I'm saying, let's just get out of your way and let your brain and gut tell you what to do, and start being intuitive, just like you found out for yourself. You start just listening to yourself. There's a lot of books. There's, I don't know, 500,000 books, million books written on diet and nutrition. They're not all wrong and they're not all right. So what Better's about is not better, not perfect. Let's just have you go through a short experiment and let your body tell you. Let your body. We never tell people to count a calorie if they're not hungry. We're like, well, then don't eat. If your body's eating this clean food and it clears it out and it tells you it's not hungry, it's got you. Trust it. Just listen to your body more than anything, and that intuition is tremendous. It's the thing that keeps you alive. To just listen to that intuition.
Now, you've mentioned a few times, just give me 3 days. So I wondered if you have a protocol or something that you'd be willing to share with our audience of what those 3 days look like.
Oh, yeah. So one thing you'll know about Betr is we have people that go through the program. They're either covered by Blue Shield of California, Florida Blue, all these different health plans. Employer groups pay for it, but we also have a lot of self-pay folks. Most of the time when someone goes through the program, they're like, hey, Jill, you're going through this with me. And they give her the protocol and Jill's following along with her and doesn't sign up for the program. I don't care. I just want to help as many people as possible. So my information is always free. What I find you get from working with Betr is we give you that personal coach. We have the AI, we have the community, but I'm willing to share this journey with anybody. So this would be a very, very simple three good days. So as you mentioned, let's say water. So we first say is want to get at least 40 to 70 ounces of water that day. Check. No chemicals, no artificial sweeteners. Check. So none of your coffee sweeteners. You can use cream if you like, but just as long as it's natural, you can use it. So a typical morning might be hard-boiled eggs with avocado. So keep it really, really simple for the person. It could be fresh salsa. Then mid-morning, they would have an apple, an orange, a grapefruit, strawberry or blueberries. We keep the fruit list very, very short to begin with, highly washed. So if you have to use baking soda because we want to get all the glycophosphate off of it. So very, very simple fruit list. And then for lunch, it could be a rotisserie chicken. It could be a mason jar salad. If they're vegan or vegetarian, it would be a vegan or vegetarian. Then followed by another fruit mid-afternoon and another dinner. And that dinner could be filet mignon and asparagus if you like. The difference is we only use a natural salt like a Himalayan or Celtic sea salt. And when we cook, we only use olive oil after the cooking process, not during the cooking process, not to denature it. Very, very simple. There's no big thing here. Now, the thing happens is you're weighing in first thing in the morning, taking pictures of your lunch and dinner. The coach is checking in with you. And then the very next morning, You get one day, you'll see the scale go down. If the weight was one of your things, if it was something else like IBS or Crohn's, you might experience something different. So you say, hey, I could do this again. So they do something similar. The second day, they get a payoff, and Wednesday, they get a payoff. And then by the fourth day, I say, now here's your choice. You can finish the 3 weeks of elimination part of the high and keep going, or you can quit. We'll give you a high five and we'll give you your money back. No, I'm going to keep going. Of course, it's their choice, and they start doing well. And once they get through that first weekend, they're there. If they have trouble preparing their food and meal prepping, we have a nationwide meal delivery service where we can actually send them fresh food. I'm not in the business of getting people, fresh food. I didn't want to have a food program, but it made it easier for people. And we're a pay for performance program, which means we only get payment if we're actually getting the outcomes for the employer groups of the health plan.
Well, that's awesome. Now, as we prepare to wrap, I always like to offer the audience a moment with that guest. So, Dr. Bill, if you have closing thoughts or any advice that you want to give people, just generally speaking, about how they can achieve their best health or their best selves, I'd love to hear it from you.
Give yourself a break immediately, please. You just take a break. You do not need anything more. You're whole and complete. This world has been incredibly toxic. Our rainwater is no longer safe to drink. Kids are being exposed to 256 chemicals. If you have a family for yourself, this is a movement towards just ancient wisdom. So just first take yourself off the hook. I know initially you're going to be cynical and skeptical. You've tried everything. I get it. Understand your cravings and all the things that have pulled you off of you getting your health back, back on track has always ended in failure. And that's because you've been going uphill. You've been working against the body than with the body. So just give yourself a break. So, you know what? I'm going to start this Monday, give a prep weekend where you can prep everything, some real self-love, chop some vegetables, make some mason jar salads, and just take it easy for 3 days. No stress, no counting the calories or weighing stuff, and watch how quickly your body responds. Your body is absolutely amazing, and you deserve it. It's your birthright to feel good. It should not be a struggle. It should be effortless. It should not be a challenge. You don't need to go get attention for suffering and talk about how piece of chocolate cake is chasing you around the kitchen. That's just because your body's out of balance, and your body can get back in balance very, very quickly without a lot of fanfare and roughing it.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think that if they do follow just a few simple days, it's easy on the tail end of that to say, wow, I feel better. And you'll notice that your cravings for things that are perhaps less healthy will start to fade into the background. It won't be the chocolate cake chasing you around the kitchen.
That's right, for sure.
Yeah. And when they're ready, they can always add some great supplements that they're bound to absorb, like omega-3s that are in that polar lipid form. Looking for something like, on my case, because I'm vegan vegetarian, I have to make sure I get vitamin B12 every day. And so I'm really clear that I'm taking a vitamin B12 in the methylated form so it's better absorbed. Thankfully, Orlo Nutrition is helping out in this way too, because the spirulina they grow produces vitamin B12 in its methylcobalamin form too. So I get my immunity boost spray and my omegas every day, and they support my general health and well-being. I'm sure that I'm getting enough of those core nutrients and not too much too, because there's such a thing as overdoing it. You don't always need to take a lot of something. And I think we as a culture think bigger, better, faster, more. That's not really the reality when it comes to your diet. And it's not really the reality when it comes to other things that you put in your body or on your skin either. So I love that you touched on this today, that you help people think about what they're putting on their body too, because the skin and our muscles are basically our two largest organs, and supporting them is critical. But if you have healthy skin, guess what? It creates its own moisture. That's part of how we work. You
right.
Get the right food in, and your skin doesn't need
Yes,
a lot of extra support from the outside, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been my pleasure. I'd love to have you back to talk more about the things that you're doing with Betr Health. And I will be sure to include links with show notes so people can find out more about you.
Great. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
I will be sure to include links to everywhere you can learn more about Dr. William Ferro and his work with Betr Health with our show notes and in our expanded blog at orlonutrition.com. There you'll find complete transcripts, links to vital resources, past interviews with notable guests, including Dr. William Lee, Dr. Joel Furman, and many more. You'll also see the video version of this podcast. While you're on the site, I encourage you to browse Orlo Nutrition's assortment of algae-based, high-impact food supplements. Listeners of this show even receive a bonus discount of an additional 10% off at checkout with the coupon code NWC for Nutrition Without Compromise. This means that you could get 25% off or more with your first order. It combines with subscription prices. If you enjoyed today's episode, I encourage you to also subscribe to this podcast. And while you're at it, leave us a review, a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, or a comment. Each of these actions will help us to reach more people, discover the show, get more great guests, and continue to put forward incredible health knowledge. As we close today's show, I hope that you'll raise a cup with me as I say my closing words. Here's to your health.
Thanks for listening to Nutrition Without Compromise. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to learn more, visit orlonutrition.com and join our mailing list. You'll gain access to complete show notes, features, and informative blogs, because nutrition shouldn't be an either-or.